So I will just introduce you as Nogol Madani,
Yes.
and I would love to invite you to talk a little bit about the work that you do and what interests you about the disruption of workplace learning.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing. So go ahead. You were going to introduce me, or I just go ahead and introduce myself?
Go ahead and speak to what's most important to you. I like to let people talk more about what might be particularly relevant, especially in this
For sure.
context.
Yeah, like I think for the longest time, Sarah, we talked about learning as the tool towards performance, delivering projects. So the idea was always that, okay, we need to perform. So, what are the things that we need to learn as a team, as a collective, as an individual? However, we're living in a time that we need to perform and transform at the same time. So, what is working now for us, it might not be necessarily useful for us in a few years as we have more technology integrated into our systems. So the question then it's like, the question that I'm trying to answer is that then what will be our learning capacity or our learning approach? And I see that there is a huge overwhelm for like leaders and for teams over this because they need to perform and deliver the projects now and all the learnings that are around that, but they constantly need to also consider what they need for this transition and that future of work that's coming. So, so this is one, I think, a big shift. And the other challenge here is that performance has one kind of learning and experimentation and transformation is a different kind of learning. One, maybe we're used to the idea of perfection in learning, of like pleasing in learning, everything that it's around, like really making sure that we're seen as competent and that we can do our job. Whereas what we're looking into this area of transformation, we need to have a lot, like be open to a lot of experimentation. None of us know what's happening. None of us, I've talked in the last few months during the summertime. We just wrapped up our first season of Human Mode Conversation. And I've just realized how much all of us, if is there a scholar or a tech founder or a leader in a corporation or a thinker, none of us know what's happening and how the technology is evolving. So everyone's talking about curiosity, everyone's talking about experimentation, everyone's talking about patience. And unfortunately, this is not necessarily the way we learn currently in the workplaces.
I think you're exactly right, and I think one of the things about having worked in this field for 25 plus years on the training side, on the learning side, driving performance is the awareness that we've had that gap for so long, but it's the current like shakeup that's making people really now say, "Oh no,
Yeah.
this is actually becoming it's not just that it's increasingly relevant, it's just that you can't you won't be able to move on without these developing these core human skills, what
Yes.
we might human skills. Um, so in a way, it's great to be around now because you think, oh, okay, so finally now we are really going to pay attention to these kinds of things. Um, and I guess some of where I would come at is like what makes them particularly human. So the curiosity and the experimentation, there's two ways of looking like at those skills in terms of what people need to develop
Yes.
to move forward. But I'm also curious to know what makes them particularly human in the sense that other systems, AI systems or other
Yeah.
systems can't do those
Do. Yeah.
things.
Just a few things that I think it's important to say is that, we are a social species. So when we say curiosity, it's a beautiful word, but curiosity in the workplace meaning asking questions, meaning saying, I don't know, meaning seeking information, sharing mistakes. And as social species, we are quite concerned about reputation, how we are being perceived, like we want to avoid conflict. So we say curiosity and empathy and all of that, but they are quite risky behaviors. attached to them. So I think the first thing about them being human is that they're putting us in situations that are quite vulnerable within the work setup. So the question is that do we have that infrastructure for being curious, for being able to experiment? And unfortunately, the answer the majority of time is no. So that is one thing. But to answer your question that what is inherently human about them, I think that, and from learning from other people who talked, is that like like these machines, at least not yet, they cannot be creative machines. They're thinking machines, the AI, but they cannot be creative machines, meaning that at the end of the day, they need context and they need those prompting in order to create their stuff. And then once they've created that, they need a human judgment in order to evaluate the quality of work. This is not something that's going to go away. I think that what we're talking about in terms of reskilling or, just like upskilling, they call it, is just that there will be many tasks that will be replaced by machines. And that's amazing. But on top of that, we will still need that human supervisor who's going to be able to call the last, like the last, like make the last decision in terms of what's working and what's not. So I guess analytical thinking, judgment, creative thinking, critical thinking. These are the things that they're going to become extremely important in the years to come. And World Economic Forum is just discussing that these are the skills beside, AI literacy and fluency that we will need in the years coming. But again, the question is that do we have that learning capacity and that cultural infrastructure to cultivate these?
So now I'm really torn because there's 2 ways I could go from here because that was fascinating. So the second part would be how do human beings how do we develop that judgment and that critical and analytical capacity if we're no longer trained in doing the work that led a lot of us to having that now?
Mhm.
If machines are doing a lot of that work, and so there's the question even now where, people coming into the workforce, a lot of those entry level jobs might be being done by AI, so they can't get in to start there to build their skills to get to the next level,
Mhm.
which I kind of think is the way experts develop, right? So
Mhm.
if you're not doing the work, how do you develop that judgment? So that's just put a pin in that. That's one thing. But then the other really cool thing was your first. So if we pull the first thread forward, which I know is your expertise really is, how do we create a climate of psychological safety in the workplace that allows people to say, I don't know, I'm curious, I'm going to try this and I might fail. Because a lot of the workplaces that I've been exposed to just naturally don't seem to have
No, they're
that
far from.
climate. So I'm going to leave it to you. We can go in either
Yes.
direction. I think both are fascinating.
I mean, that the first question that you ask is an amazing question, and I'm gonna say it here. I'm not sure if I have the answer, but maybe we can brainstorm around it. Um, like I talked to someone who is a professor at Harvard Business School, and he mentioned something very interesting. That he said that the concept of collaboration now is changing, and the concept of turnover rate is changing because, like always companies were afraid that people will leave. But now the person that would leave not only will just leave with their own knowledge, but the whole context that they've created with their AI agents. So this is something that we need to, I believe that you're 100% right. There will be some people who just come to the job and will not necessarily have that time to learn or to become expert or gain that experience. But the question is that how can we create those learning opportunities between machines and people and those who create a context for those AI agents, and then make sure that that learning opportunity is somehow distributed for everyone joining the team and within the team. Because then now the question that he was mentioning, or the concern that he was mentioning, is that now turnover rate means a very different thing. It means that not only one person is leaving, a person with the whole context, and an AI agent is basically leaving because they're the ones who build that system. So the question is that then who are going to be the people who are going to be prompting or creating those, like, context or thinking opportunities for that AI agent, and how can we make sure that there is an equitable opportunity for learning within our teams? Because, again, to your point, even the idea of judgment, for example, my concern is always this, that so many minorities, I'm a minority myself, women, people of color, they already feel quite like hesitant to share their ideas, to share their evaluation. So how can this become a thing when that evaluation is on an AI agent? And then what if we are just building biased systems? So when you look at it, Sarah, I mean, you're an expert in learning, but there's lots of layers that are quite, you think that, "Oh my goodness, this is quite complex." And the biggest challenge, to your point, comes to the first question the second question that you ask is that we already unfortunately don't have those foundations within our systems. We know that we don't have diversity and inclusion. We know that we don't have psychological safety. We know that our teams are not necessarily built, or our leadership styles are not necessarily built for collaboration. We're still functioning on the leadership of 1950s and 60s, which is all around, it's extremely male dominant, it's still around, like, authority, know it all. And we're just far from that now, like we're just like there's nothing, no one has know it all answer. You cannot actually embrace that approach anymore. So the question is that how can we change that paradigms around leadership and around team cultures and team dynamics so that we can create learning teams? And I hope, this is really my hope, is that we had internet, we had like social media and cell phones, we had COVID, we had many different disruptive opportunities for people to do things differently. But I guess somehow, somewhere, they thought that, you know what, as long as we can just stretch it and do the things that are working, we've been doing this for the last 20 years and it's all good. And they were able to do that. I'm not sure if the AI world will allow that. The disruption is too big to continue doing things like before. So I guess maybe that is an amazing invitation for those of us who are just willing to somehow challenge our old ways of doing things.
So, what I really love about that is when I conceived the concept for this podcast around disrupting workplace learning, I didn't want it to just focus on AI or technology disruptions. What you're talking about is a more fundamental, well, not more fundamental, but for me, really interesting disruption as far as questioning the way we relate to each other as human beings in the workplace and challenging the structures and the processes, things that have been in place for a long time to be able to now make space for or create a climate for people to feel secure enough to share what they're thinking, what they might be worried about, what they're willing to take risks on, their vulnerability. For me, that's a really it's a hugely important topic in the workplace. And so I'm wondering if you might be able to share a specific example of work that you've done
Yeah,
was it some kind of intervention to help create a climate of increased safety, psychological safety in the workplace?
for sure. So basically, when we look at, psychological safety, I think it's quite it's an abstract concept, like it's like the word culture, all that. So for me as a ex-engineer, I, at the end of the day, I'm trained as an engineer, and I think like them. For me, it was always this challenge that, okay, but this is here. How can we bring it to the ground? Like, what does it mean on day to day? Like, how can we make it tangible so that I could understand it? And like, we look at when we think about psychological safety, I look at it from four lenses of inclusion, collaboration, communication, and creativity. We said, you know what? These are the good indicators. Like when I enter a dynamic, it's really hard to pinpoint that, oh my goodness, this is psychologically safe environment, because what does that really mean? But maybe I can look at and say that, is everyone talking in the meeting? Is someone dominating the conversation? Are people feeling comfortable sharing mistakes? Like, do they collaborate or is silo working? So there's going to be lots of indicators or behaviors or norms that I can just pinpoint and say, okay, this is either show the presence or like the absence of psychological safety. We do a very simple exercise when we work with our clients, and it's really based on learning, experiential learning, and it's the idea that what kills psychological safety and what prevents people from performing. And they have to do it as like a researchers. It's not about their teams. They just go out and they just think about it and say, you know what? If people they're multitasking at the computer, this I don't feel comfortable sharing them. Or like they have like weird, like, nonverbal, like, and we just see a huge list of things, and then the next question is that then maybe you can circle around the ones that are present in your team. And if you're courageous, so courageous enough, circle the ones that you might be doing on a daily basis. And again, when people talk about the concepts of psychological safety, so many people say, oh no, we don't have harassment. But it's not that. It's basically, are we contributing to creating a climate where everyone feels comfortable speaking up, or we're just somehow ruin it? And to be honest with you, every single one of us, we can raise our hands because we do something that is killing the vibe or just stopping people from contributing. It could be, I'm a very fast, impatient person. So like I jump into help and answer people and decide for them. And I don't leave enough space for people to share ideas, to really just gain their confidence to just say, you know what, maybe I have something to say. Or someone said that, you know what, we're just stressed out around agenda, and say, this is not part of agenda. Let's take this offline. Like they're just simple phrases that when you hear it, or people say, oh my goodness, this is a wonderful idea. Let's follow up on that. Nothing happens after that. So next time, I won't share my idea. So, and then when you look at these small moments, you just see, okay, we're doing that all the time. So our work is like around few things. Our work comes in and it just say that the first thing is that you have to gain the knowledge around what psychological safety really means. It's not safe space, it's not pampering people, it's not creating comfortable environment. In fact, it is actually creating a environment of candor where people can disagree with each other in a respectful manner. They can bring challenges without the fear of being judged. So that knowledge building's the first step. After that is really raising awareness around, like, people start to sense that, okay, I'm in this interaction, what's working and what's not, what is really stopping me, what is stopping others. This is the next step towards change. And then after that, it's a question of experimentation. Now we want to bring new behaviors or new ways of doing things. We want to make sure that there is an opportunity for people to share half baked ideas or to share their concerns about integrating technology, or about the transformation that they're going through, or something that's not working. And we understand that it's very hard for people to take risks. So we make sure that leadership is on board and they're the ones making risks. And the second thing is that we actually develop 3 months program so that people can experiment. We just say that it's like going to the gym. It's like doing meditation. You might do so many different versions till something at some point sticks. It's the same thing for team behaviors and team norms. And then once we've been through that, then you're ready to start integrating norms. So it's a long, messy, um, process, the process of behavioral change, because we're talking here about individual behavioral change, collective behavioral change. And that's where we look at it. We just say you look at it as a gym membership. You just look at it and you don't need to overwhelm yourself with, like, oh my goodness, I'm going to do this. You take one small action, but you actually commit to it consistently. And once you see the impact of change, then you're willing to actually do it and really make it a ritual. So this is basically our kind of, I don't know if it answered your question, but it's more of our approach or like our framework that we look at in terms of bringing psychological safety into teams.
So, just as a learning practitioner, I'm was curious about because it sounds like a lot of that work is very well integrated in the workplace, in the actual work being done by the
Yes.
teams, as opposed to pulling people out and having a workshop or doing some kind of a learning intervention and then putting people back. So it's got that follow through. Um, but how much of your intervention is actually like closely tied to the actual work people are doing, and how much of it is maybe leading a half day workshop or
Yes,
two I don't
sure.
so I imagine it's a mix of both.
Yeah, for sure. We have workshops where we people basically exchange. They're like, they're based on experiences. They talk, they learn the theory and all of that. But the majority of time, then we just say that this is your guideline for this week. Go and test it out in real life. So that's why when people come to us and say that, can we just do this 3 months in like 2 days, extensive, like 10 hours? I said, no, and it's the same way that you cannot go to gym for 2 weeks and then eat burger for a month and expect to change. Like, it is the question of behavioral change. So it is always this idea that you learn in that bubble or in that lab, you experience things, you discuss it, but then you bring it to real life, again, bring back the learning and then see how you can tweak it in order to integrate it. So it's really around the idea of experiment in the lab and then bring it into the real life.
Oh, I really appreciate that. Like, I find that disruptive too because and I can imagine you do have clients who say, "We can't do the 3 months. We you just feed us what we need to do, in a day or 2, and we'll figure out how to apply it." And that whole one and done mentality just doesn't bring change. It doesn't make change. And so it's really nice to hear about a structure
Yes,
that's sort of an ongoing first of all, it's multiple interventions, but it's also closely integrated to their day-to-day
exactly.
work and not done in a separate like you said, in a bubble, and then somehow people are supposed to figure out how to apply that back on the
Exactly. And
job.
even now, we're just launching a new program for leadership that is only 4 weeks, 2 hours each week. And again, it would have been just a 1 day, full day. But I think, Sarah, we have passed that phase that people can just come and do the checklist and say that we've done this for the sake of doing it. We've done an emotional intelligence workshop. Again, if it doesn't lead to a fundamental change in how you lead and how you work together, it will not be that infrastructure that you need for transformation and future of work. So for me, it's really clear that we need to work with people that they are deeply convinced that not only they have to do something for the sake of learning, but they have to integrate new ways of learning and being and working together. So that's why we actually say no to many people that just say, can you do this in this short amount of time? Or I'm the CEO, I cannot come. Or like the leader said, no, if you're not coming, we're not doing anything. Because you can never expect your team members to take more risks than you as a leader. You can never expect people to be more vulnerable than you are. You cannot come to me and say, how come people are not asking for help or sharing mistakes if this is not something that you do on a regular basis? So for us, it's extremely important that there are some elements in this learning sphere that you need to follow. If not, we're not going to do this work because we know that it's not going to lead to change.
That takes a lot of discipline on your side, and I'm not just saying that because you say we're past the point where we believe that, except it's still being done a lot,
Oh,
and I
it's
think we all know that we're past the point, but still that's what a lot of the ask
is.
is.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree with you.
Yeah, wonderful. I have a very specific question while I have you here. I'm gonna ask your advice about something that happened this morning.
Oh my goodness, go ahead. Let's brainstorm on
No,
it. Yeah.
great time. So I'm working on a project with a new team. It's 3 weeks or so. I'm new to them, to their processes, to their client, and I jumped into an email stream yesterday, sort of read some stuff, thought I understood some stuff, sent out an email, and then this morning found out that I had made a mistake and I had misunderstood something. And they're like, "Well, no, that's not what," and I'm the lowest on the totem pole. So like it's all the people that I'm at the bottom.
Yes.
So I wrote back and I was like, "Oh no, I'm so sorry, my fault. I when you wrote and I did put it in the email. I'm like, when you wrote this, I understood it to mean
Yes.
that,
Yeah.
but I was wrong. Um, and so I'm sorry, and I'll try to fix it during the day. And so that's just one thing. But in terms of being able to evaluate psychological safety, like in a very specific example, the response back I got was from that person, nothing that I said that to. And then from another person who was on the thread, who was more, was implicated, said, just let me know when you're ready, and then I'll go back in and I'll look at things. And I kinda sat back and I'm like, I don't quite understand the response. Like, does that mean that, like, it's okay, don't worry about it, and we'll figure it out? Or did it mean, like,
Don't
don't do
screw it
that
up
again?
again. Yeah.
Say that. Don't ever say that again. I'm not quite sure how to interpret that.
But I mean, I think that, you're right. I don't know also how to interpret that, but maybe a conversation with them is just could be like easy to ask them and say, I'm new. I know the dynamics are different. I just want to know that like how this was perceived, how my email was perceived. Like how would you I'm just trying to understand how things work around here. And then once you understand how things work around there, you can just say, okay, like this is you say, "You know what? No, this was actually great. We just wanted to give you the time you needed so that when you're ready, you can just come back to us." Or just say that, "You know what? Like, we hope that you just shared it differently, or we don't necessarily talk about like mistakes this openly." I think that we can just be like, especially for you as a new person and as someone who's like a consultant, you can just say, "You know what? I just wanted to understand the dynamics here to be better, you know, to learn how to communicate more effectively with the team." But what you've
Sure.
done is definitely a sign of someone who is feeling psychologically safe.
Well,
Well,
for now.
now,
We'll see.
but
I'll see
you
what
see, but you see, Sarah, this is exactly how it works. That is just a simple, and and this is for me, it was game changer, and it was game changer for our clients as well, that it's not these grand gestures. Like so many people talk about harassment or like cornering people. Said, no, guys, look, it's just not that at all. It happens in a much simpler moments. It's how you answer, is not answering, is like being vague, don't have clarity, don't give clear feedback. Like this is how it works. And next time you just say, okay, like I cannot say that. Or, and you're just you're just overthinking it. And that's already somehow stopping you to contributing.
so that's what I think is very powerful about your approach is that sometimes when you take people out of their work context, you give them a learning intervention of some kind, and it can never really address those nitty gritty specific things as they're coming up. So it's you can talk about them a bit, and you talk about the bigger picture things. You might run through some kind of
Mhm.
scenarios or examples of things, but it's never as relevant as when the people are then back on the job, and something comes up, and you're like, "Ooh, I think I learned something about that. What kind of thing was that?" But if you've got them actively working on these concepts over the course of 3 months on the job,
Yes,
as these little things come up, that's incredibly powerful because you're exactly like you said, it's in those specific moments is when culture is built and sustained or
it's broken.
altered.
Yeah, alter.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Or broken. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. No, but to your
Yeah.
point, and, and I think that for example, like I think that I was never happy as an engineer, but I didn't have the words. Like diversity and inclusion, they were not words. Or we didn't, I didn't even know what was considered microaggression or aggression. Like the vocabularies, these tools, they're extremely important to somehow for us to help us understand what we are seeing and somehow you know, define our experiences. So it's the same thing for psychological safety that, once you have these tools, when you have that knowledge, when you have that understanding, you're better equipped to foster psychological safety or to see it when it's not happening or it's becoming broken or like someone is hindering it. And that is the first step, towards change and gaining that agency. And again, based on that team dynamic, can you discuss it? Can you bring it up? But it's just that knowledge, building that capacity that I think that it's going to help us a lot. Because again, I've experienced this firsthand that I think that if in 2011 I had the words and the vocabularies and the practices and the knowledge and the awareness that we had back in 2020 when we talked about diversity and inclusion or like psychological safety, I would have acted differently. Maybe I wouldn't even have stayed in the jobs that long because they wouldn't be acceptable for me. So it's just that gaining that knowledge and that experience is extremely key. And I hope that this work, more than anything, give people that context in which they can just evaluate how their culture, how healthy their culture, their dynamic is.
I'm gonna take it in the opposite way. Because you didn't have the language, you were dissatisfied, you left engineering, you came into this field and was thrilled that you did because now you can make all of this transformational change in all these companies. That's great. I'm kinda grateful for the fact there was
Well,
language before.
I'm too, to be honest with you. At the end of the day, it turned out well.
I I have a misconception, I think, about engineers because when I talk to you, it's so judgmental, it's so bad, but you don't feel rigid and overly structured to me.
No.
You seem, like, open and warm and engaging, so,
But that's
apologies to
why
all
I
the en
couldn't but that's why I couldn't I couldn't survive. But, that's the other I work actually with a lot of tech companies and with a lot of companies in STEM because, at the end of the day, this is my world that I know. And I see how much, we've just actually finished a culture camp, like, back in, like, before summer with an engineering firm, but we had people from finance, the CFO was there, the people from sales and marketing were there. And just the idea of them talking to each other, help them understand how different they are and how differently they work and they want to interact. Like they were just saying, like I interviewed them afterwards and said that, you know what? I love the idea of getting hard feedback and constructive feedback, but I just through these conversations, I understand that this is not the way how everyone wants to work. It's not a sign of love for people, it's a sign of criticism, like, somehow judgment. So just understanding how we function and how we really work together, it's the first step. And just acknowledging this fact that what works for me is not what works for others. I'm a extrovert person, but that doesn't mean that everyone who wants to contribute in the meeting, they're going to raise their hand and they do it. This is not the reality. So it's constantly around designing our moments or our interactions in a way that can foster that safety for maximum contribution and inclusion. Like for me, like I think if we do one thing correctly is that we're designing moments. We're designing interactions. We say, okay, this is the way you can go for. You can start your meeting with a check-in. It can help create a context. You can change your question this way. So that intentionality during our interactions can definitely change things.